Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. I don't know if that sounds familiar. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. What does it mean? Well, that's what we're going to be looking at for the foreseeable future on Thursdays, Lord willing. And it is something that comes from the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament. I've been thinking about Ecclesiastes and wanting to look at it and spend some time in it, and I thought that maybe a good way to do that would be on Thursday, to be thinking through the book of Ecclesiastes and what is it about, what does it mean, what can we learn from it, and I hope that you will join me in this study as we think through the book of Ecclesiastes and what is really going on and what we need to and can learn from it and be encouraged by. And so we're just going to take it probably a chapter a day, just one at a time, and we'll kind of work through it. So let's begin today with Ecclesiastes chapter 1, and just a little bit of an introduction of Ecclesiastes. And again, maybe, if you're already familiar with the book of Ecclesiastes, then you probably know a lot of these things and may even know some insights that I may not be aware of. But I hope that I will continue to learn more as I go through this. But maybe you're not familiar or as familiar with the book of Ecclesiastes, and I hope this will be helpful to you because Ecclesiastes has some very important lessons overall. As we get into it, there's going to be some specific lessons that can be taken, but I think overall the book of Ecclesiastes is about one thing, and it is really introduced throughout this book, but especially in chapter 1. And ultimately, just to simplify it, the book of Ecclesiastes really asks, what is the point of life? What is the point of it all? Why are we here? Where are we going? We know that we're only here on earth for so long, so what's the point? Ecclesiastes can, and in some way it can appear to be, and in some ways is a depressing book when you kind of get into it and think about it. But really, when we study the entirety of the book of Ecclesiastes, and at least we come to the conclusions that are made, it's really not meant to be depressing, but rather meant to be enlightening, meant to be encouraging, reminding us of what life is all about. And so I hope this will be an encouraging time and study as we work through this together. So let's begin in chapter 1. By all accounts, we understand that Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, or king in Jerusalem. And it just kind of, all the hints are there. Seems to, although Solomon is not mentioned by name, it just, several things in here seem to pretty much make it clear that Solomon is the one who wrote this. And Solomon would have been a good one to write this, as we'll see through this, as he was, as we like to say, the wisest man that ever lived. He was given wisdom by God. He was wise in a lot of ways and a lot of things, and here is really contemplating the meaning of it all. And I think this really, he introduces this in chapter 1 of his thought process here, really what he is seeking to answer and figure out more clearly. And I think really helps us, reminds us of what life is all about as well. So Ecclesiastes 1:1, the words of the preacher. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. And the idea of Ecclesiastes, even in the name of Ecclesiastes, is, that of speaking to an assembly, a preacher, a speaker. And so he introduces himself as the preacher, speaking to people, speaking to the assembly, wanting people to know these things. But he begins verse 2, really. As I said just a moment ago, vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does vanity mean? What is the idea of vanity? What is that which is, there's kind of several different ways to describe the idea of vanity. It is fleeting, it is futile, it is absurd or frustrating or nonsense. There's kind of, basically the idea of vanity is there's this emptiness, there's this, it's lacking, or it's fleeting, it's futile, it's temporary, it's not sufficient, if you will. And so he starts with this, vanity of vanities, all is vanity, everything's vanity. And wow, this is a really great way to start a book, right? Seems pretty depressing, a pretty depressing way to start a book. But it's really got a point, because the question, so he really makes a declaration in verse 2 to start that all is vanity, but then he asks the question of what he means by that, because the question is, verse 3, what profit or gain has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? If I could generalize that, or kind of simplify that, or kind of see the big picture, the point, that question, what Solomon's really asking is, what's the point of life? What do we get? Why are we here? Because as he's going to see, and as Solomon's going to express throughout this, as we're going to see, bit by bit, is we're here, we live, we work, we toil, we grow old, and we die. So if you look at it just from a physical, earthly, human perspective, what's the point? Now, I'm going to jump to the conclusion, really, or kind of overall of the whole point of Ecclesiastes is, the point is that without God, then all is vanity, all is futile, useless, pointless. Without God, it is depressing. Life is depressing. And that's ultimately going to be what Solomon's getting at here, and trying to help us even understand as well. That without God, if you take God out of the picture, if you take God out of the equation, then you just look at our situation as human beings on this earth, and we're born and we grow old and we work and work and work and we're tired and we get sick, and when we work and work and work and we gain stuff and we lose stuff, and then we die and lose everything. So what's the point of our existence? What's the point of life? And if you look at it just that way, without any hope, without any meaning, without any purpose, it's pretty depressing. But that's why we've got to come to know the true meaning of life, to know our Creator. And that is going to be the ultimate journey and goal of this book, of Ecclesiastes specifically. They ask that question, what profit has a man from all the toil in which he labors under the sun? Because Solomon basically then says, the earth just keeps turning and turning and turning. Time keeps going on and on and on, and people keep coming and going. As he says, one generation passes away and another generation comes. But the earth abides forever. The earth remains. The sun also rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it arose. So year after year, generation, the sun keeps coming up, sun keeps going down. The wind, verse 6, goes toward the south, comes to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again in a circuit. The wind keeps blowing and blowing and blowing. Keeps going and going and going. Verse 7, all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. That's a pretty neat thing, which speaks to the awesomeness of God's power and his creation. Really think even about the wind and how everything works in the universe and in creation. But the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. So creation, earth, wind, sea, rivers, sun, everything just keeps going like clockwork. Just going and going and going. People come, people go. And he says, all things are full of labor or weariness. Man cannot express it. The eye is is not satisfied with seeing, the ear never filled with hearing. Time keeps going and going and going and going. We're never truly, satisfied with what we see, with what we hear. All things are full of labor and weariness. That's just life. Verse 9, that which has been is what will be. That which is done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun, really. Is there anything of which it may be said, see, this isn't new? But it has already been in ancient times before us. And Solomon makes that point that when you really think about it generally, he's talking generally. Obviously, someone may say, well, but some things are new. There's new inventions. Yeah, cell phones have not been around forever. But that's not Solomon's point. Is really, when you think about it, the way life works, the way people work, or the way, everything works, is it's always been the same. We sleep, we eat, we work, we drink, we do things. Life is really, there's nothing new under the sun. What has been will always be, and there's truly nothing new. Life just keeps going. Humans keep existing. Animals keep doing their things, and it's been the same cycle since the beginning of time. And then verse 11. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of things that are to come, by those who will come after. The point is, again, generally speaking, there's a lot that we don't remember of former times that nobody remembers. People, places, things. Now, a lot of things we remember because, but people have had to record them, write them down. A lot of things have been forgotten. Even, we think about it. There are people and places and events and things that we don't know anything about because they happened a long time ago. One day, there's going to come a time when people aren't going to even remember me, remember you. If you keep going long enough, nobody's going to know we existed. There's not really going to be any remembrance of us. That's just the way it works. When time goes on and on and on and on and on. And so, Solomon, considering that of just the continual cycle of life, the continual cycle of creation, of earth, of everything. And it goes on and on and on. But again, the question is, what's the point? What's the benefit? What's the profit? If everything's the same, we're just in this, continual cycle, this machine that keeps, human beings keep coming and going. What's the goal? What's the purpose? What's the meaning? Is it worth it? Why are we here? What are we going to do? Because then he finishes out this chapter, beginning of verse 12, that I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I set my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. So Solomon wanted to know all that's done, wanted to really think about it with wisdom. And he said, this burdensome task God has given to the sons of man, by which they may be exercised or afflicted. This busy work, this busy life, this burdensome task of going on and on, toiling, working, laboring. But again, what's the point? Solomon said, I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity and grasping for the wind. When you try grasping for the wind, try chasing the wind, try holding the wind, it ain't going to happen. It's vanity. It's futile. It's pointless. It's worthless. So why is Solomon saying that? Right? He says, verse 15, what is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be numbered. Again, things will continue on. Things will be as they always have been. And we really can't change a whole lot. There's not a whole lot that we can change about life and about the cycle of life and about time and about creation and how things work. So Solomon says, I communed within, or I said in my heart, look, I have attained greatness and gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge. He says, I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is grasping after wind. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And what exactly does Solomon mean by that? I mean, there may be some different thoughts on what exactly Solomon meant by, what he just said at the end of chapter 1. But I think ultimately, what he's getting at is, the more you search for answers, the more you find out, at least in, when we're talking about, strictly the cycle of life, and trying to understand it and grasp it without God in the equation, really. It is wearisome. It is burdensome. It is depressing. Because again, ultimately his point is going to be that without God, then this life that we go through, our existence is pointless. It is futile. It is meaningless. I mean, what's the point that we show up on earth? We live for so many years, we toil, we labor, and we die. So really, this whole, if you will, introduction to his letter, chapter 1 really serves as a good introduction to ask this question, what's the point? When you look at earth and life, and when you look at all that man is doing, we're left with that question, what is the point? And that is the question that we're going to answer throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. Solomon's going to answer, actually. Solomon, along the way, is going to answer for us what it's all about and really get to the final conclusion of it all. But we need to, really, before we even move on, do some thinking and contemplating ourselves like Solomon. To truly think about our physical existence. Why are we here? Things keep going. What are we doing? Yeah, we're going to die. So what's the point of it all? And with that question in mind, come ready as we get into chapter 2, as we progress in this, ultimately leading us to, yes, the answer being God. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to answer this question with you as we think through the book of Ecclesiastes in our life and our existence. And again, what are we going to do about it? And I hope that this will be a helpful study for us all. Continue to ponder, continue to think, continue to really ask these questions, and to continue to seek these answers in the Word of God. God bless.